Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the ProPhysique Code with Stephen Bogrand, obviously, Tyler Weeb. I wanted to play games and be like, it's YEB.
Weeby. Well,
Maybe.
Weeby is like the American way of saying it, and Weeb is the Canadian way of saying it. So you can go both ways.
So, did your parents just know before you were born that you were going to be a weeb? I mean, obviously they had an indication, right?
Well, I mean, considering that is their last name, I assume they knew that I would be a Weeb. I mean, we always would go by Weeby, but then when I moved to Canada, I changed it to Weeb.
So, with that being said, I was sorry, we have Danica here too.
Yes.
Um,
Hi, everybody.
so with that
Already
being said,
derailed.
how did you feel knowing that you were born into having to watch anime?
I have never watched anime.
Then you're not a real weeb, are you?
I guess I'm
Got him.
catching up now. Yes. Ha ha
Sucker.
ha. Yeah. I guess I mean, I
Ah,
did watch Pokemon. I don't know if that's really considered anime though.
I think I'll count it.
Yeah, okay.
I'll count it. It is an animation.
I actually introduced Quinn to Pokemon yesterday or a couple days ago. We started watching it, so she was
Just
loving it.
don't let Paul know if you get the trading cards.
Oh, I've got a binder full.
Oh, okay. Well, now you're in trouble because he's gonna want to see them all. He's gonna want to know which ones need to get graded and which ones are worth something.
Oh, I'll show them.
All right. So now that we're done with my shenanigans, I guess what we're actually talking about today is like body shaming, just kind of a thing, I suppose. It's unfortunate, but a thing. And obviously, this was a topic that Danica had the idea for. Is that obvious? I don't know. I think
Is it obvious? How come I mean,
you have the feelings.
y'all experience it too, like not personally, but you are in the fitness industry
Yeah.
and there are many probably consultations that you have had where you've talked to them about like how they feel about their body. Maybe one would think that it's because I dive a little bit deeper, like, well, what was said about your body or where did that belief come from? Um, but body shaming is something that's very, very real and has strong impact on many levels for people.
Yeah. See, because you're deeper and I'm very shallow. I think maybe that's why it seems obvious to me. Look, see, only laughs, no disagreement.
No,
Um,
I think that once you get to talking, then you're pretty good. You're very insightful.
don't
You got
tell
to give
people I have
yourself more
feelings.
credit. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Thanks.
But I think, maybe just to like start the conversation and kind of keep moving into it, like, and maybe just talking from our own personal experiences, and I don't want to assume on both of your parts, but I would assume that each of us got into fitness at the very beginning due to having some body issues that maybe we felt, okay, we need to get into fitness. And I mean, I know for myself, like that started around 13, 14, 15, really skinny kid, wanted to build muscle, didn't have a lot of self-confidence, and saw the gym and obviously like all the bodybuilding magazines and all of that of like, oh, I want to look like that. I want to have muscle. Maybe I'll have that confidence once I finally reach X, whatever that might look like, that image that I think everyone has in their mind of like, oh, this is what I want to look like. I'll be happy when I reach this. I'll have my confidence when I have this. And so it may not be a driving force anymore for me, but certainly that was a big impetus into my journey into fitness. And so I think it's safe to say that 99.9% of people, that is just going to be the big driving factor to start whatever fitness journey they might be in of, I don't like the way I look and I want to look better. I think that's a very common thing that even as coaches and who do this for a living, that's where we started.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting to kind of look at the idea of internally shaming ourselves. Because I do think that that happens, and it's something that I see a lot in a lot of people that I talk to. Unfortunately, like literally the person who is the biggest a-hole to somebody is themselves. It's their own self-talk. It's how they talk about themselves, their body, the things they can or can't do, how they feel, that kind of stuff. Um, but I still think that there is a huge external factor even within that that kind of precludes that and gets to that. And because it's very interesting. If you go back and look at some of the data prior to where we're at now with social media, but how Western media influence was kind of put out in other parts of the world and how that impacted a lot of people's body image. Oh, I'm not skinny enough. I'm not pretty enough. And, obviously, this is back when Photoshop was still, it was a thing, but it wasn't as big of a thing. Um, and it was when everybody was like, oh, you got to be thin. And they looked at a lot of in particular females body image kind of ratings, and as more of this kind of Western media and came out, those ratings and how women were saying they felt about their bodies continued to actually get worse and worse. And so I think that because for me, I, I don't know, it feels weird to say, yeah, I guess when I got out of my first engagement, I was like, yeah, I'm a little tubby, probably need to do something about this, so I can make sure that, the women that blah 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 they're happy with it, whatever. But I don't think for me personally I ever felt super far off in terms of like my body image being a huge factor in my fitness. Mine was more about wanting to be strong, feeling like that was a protective mechanism. And so for me personally, I think when I got into the fitness industry and I started doing bodybuilding and being competitive, that was probably the like getting into those things and seeing other people, honestly, I think was one of the factors of when my body image was its worst, oddly enough.
No, I would have to actually agree with you. There's growing up, I played three sports. So my involvement into the gym was very performance based, and it was to be stronger, to be faster, to have more agility. And it wasn't until getting into competitions that even all the magazines like Oxygen magazine, I was like, this is great, but it didn't impact me. My internal dialogue was still pretty steady Eddie and didn't really impact me. I liked going to the gym. I liked being stronger. I liked being able to do a pull up. Like it was very performance based. And then doing and not blaming it on competitions, the focus shifted because it had to shift in athletic performances like field hockey, basketball. Like no one's going to look me up and down and be like, well, you don't look the part of like the goalie. And that didn't happen. But when it came to shows, it wasn't my performance, like how strong am I? It was all about aesthetics. And that narrative, not that I lost the performance base, but then my mind became aware of something else that existed. And then that's kind of where that internal dialogue came in.
Interesting. So I was the complete opposite of you guys because by the time I competed, I was already past that, right? So
Mhm.
my assumptions were wrong.
Oh. Yeah, I've always
Well,
so
no, but it's interesting to know kind of everyone's where it even happened because everybody's going to be very different, right? Like some females and males go through high school being like, yeah, my body's changing and this is great and this is fine and they're totally cool. And then others go through that transitioning period and that's when they start to become aware of their body. And that's when they start to do the comparison game. And I think everyone's is very different. It's kind of knowing though, it's really good to reflect and say, where did this start? Like, where did I even start to have like an idea or think about like, huh, how do I look? Like where did that aesthetic piece start to happen? And then what influenced it? And then how did it influence it? Did it influence it in a positive way, in a negative way? And then knowing all of that, like looking upstream, knowing all of that, am I still kind of going based off of those beliefs and narratives that like initiated way back when?
Well, I mean, so I think it's definitely interesting because I was always a skinny kid. Like when I got out of high school, I was like 5'10", 5'11", and like 135 pounds. So that's not what you typically think of, I think, when you think of the body shaming in general, anyways, especially not as a kid. But there were definitely lots of people that I saw that were body shamed on a consistent basis if they were overweight as a kid. And obviously, we'll say that that still goes today. Um, so I think my experience personally in that is really different than I think people who have dealt with that for most of their lives. Like for individuals who struggle to manage weight, maintain weight, and they've tried XYZ. And so it's hard because I don't want to lose sight of the fact that that's a real thing. I don't want to lose sight of the fact that that has had a big impact on who they are, how they think, how they see themselves. Um, but I also want to try and, I guess, share our experiences in terms of there's still some things that we can share that are going to help you feel better about things and possibly help you make progress. It's this weird thing for me in my mind where I'm like, okay, cool, we're talking about body shaming and we're talking about how different people perceive themselves differently. And realistically, we'll perceive others differently based on what they see externally. And being in a job where it's like, for a lot of people, my job is to help them change how they look externally
Mhm.
and say, that is completely separate from all of your value and the things that you add in life into the world.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's, important to always say too, like it's not bad to want to look better, right? I think there is that fine line that we have to define of like, okay, we need to I think we need to try and work on, depending on that person, of is this your whole thing, right? If this is your only driving factor, okay, let's maybe start to have that discussion of how can we maybe now dial that back a little bit and bring in some more of those internal things that we're talking about. But still it's okay to want to look better. Like we still all have that goal of wanting, like that's just always going to be there, and that's not bad. I think what we're talking about, and maybe it's obvious, but it's when it does become that overdriving factor and then really having that negative effect of, someone sees the scale fluctuate 2 pounds and it's like full on freak out mode. And those feelings aren't bad, but we do need to make sure that we're addressing those feelings of, okay, well, like Danica said, why? Why are we feeling that? Let's get at the heart of that so that we can start to have maybe that dialogue of, where is this coming from? Why is this? And then how can we now start to take those steps forward of being accepting and understanding, not just from a logical perspective of why those fluctuations or whatever might be happening, but from an emotional side as well, and have space for that.
Yeah. I think it's important too to remind ourselves like when did the image of ourselves start to even exist? And also, why I always say to people like, who are we to like throw out things about each other's bodies? Like, unless asked, like unless to be I can say like, hey, what do you think about this body? Like, unless we are asked to, I think it's really unkind for people to just throw out body shaming or whatever it may be, not knowing the potential impact. And it doesn't even have to be body, it doesn't have to be shaming, right?
Right.
Like it could also be something, because I remember growing up feeling I've had a bubble butt since I was like born. And so that was my nickname in my family. So people would be like, oh, bubble butt, how are you doing? Bubble butt, bubble butt. And like now that's fantastic, right? But I definitely, it was made aware to me, something of my body was causing attention at a very young age. And I think that that starts to happen at very little ages where like people will say, oh my gosh, she's so skinny, or oh my gosh, you're like a rail, or oh my goodness, you got no little muscles there, or oh my goodness, look at those chubby cheeks and look at those big thighs you got. Not thinking that if we say those things repetitively, people are going to become aware of that. And then they will, at some point, if it's continuously said, be like, huh, is this something that I should probably know about myself too? And should I feel a certain way about this? And then it kind of can take its journey on its own. Hopefully you have support as you go through it. But it is important to note those things because if you're struggling now with the way that your body looks or with how your body is changing or anything like that, then it's important to like go back and say, yeah, I remember when so and so was watching me run and said, damn, your legs are pretty thick. And I didn't know how to feel about that. It's important to be able to go back there too. Also, it's important to know what the fuck you're saying to other people. Like, and to be able to censor yourself and know that that words have impact. And even if we think that we are not going to negatively impact people because they might be 5 years old, 4 years old, I bet you $1 million you're wrong. So you have to be conscious of what you're saying to other people in regards to their body. This doesn't mean that you censor everything. It just means that you have forward thinking.
So, I mean, I think that can be a hard thing for some people because for some people, they've been hearing something about their physique forever, for as long as they can remember. Not some kids are overweight at like 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
If I had weight issues at that age and I was constantly hearing about it throughout the entirety of my life, essentially, because that's been something I've always struggled with, I can't really pinpoint when that started. It's just kind of always been there. And for better or worse, right or wrong, I think people, myself included at times, we are more apt to talk about people's bodies because it's something we see. It's a visual thing that is out there that everybody sees. It's not like my personality where maybe I don't talk or maybe I hide certain parts of my personality around certain people because I don't want to create more drama or issues in that situation, whatever it might be. It's not something about my interests where I don't have to necessarily share all of my interests up front. Like when we talk about our looks, people see us and they see that. And so, again, for better or worse, I think because it's out there for all to see, and it's just one of those things, in general, people feel more comfortable just discussing that without maybe necessarily much thought in a lot of
Yeah.
cases.
I agree with you. And I also think it's important. I've said this to many of my clients, I've said this to family members too. It's that uh, being able to zoom out in those like 2 seconds that you have to say, hey, if someone is like, maybe someone's lost a lot of weight, right? And you're like, hey, you're looking good. How are you feeling? Or, hey, you've put on a couple of pounds, or hey, I noticed that like you're slowing down a little bit, or anything like that. How are you feeling? That is, you compare those two because you can know aesthetics. It's very easy to know aesthetics, right? I can't look at somebody and be like, I know exactly how you're feeling and what's going on internally. Like, I don't know that. So you can put the aesthetics in there, but then pair it with a how are you feeling? And that doesn't take a lot. Like, it really doesn't. I think that it's just easier to be like, this is what I visually see. So this is kind of what I'm going to say.
And I would say, honestly, you could start the conversation off with how are you feeling and allow another individual to say, oh, well, I'm down 10 pounds and like physically my knees maybe feel a little bit better or, my shirts are feeling a little bit looser, that kind of thing. Like those are the normal expectations that we have with weight loss because let's be real, who we are. Like, so we can also still have a conversation about those things without having that being like the North Star guiding the whole conversation or how it starts.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, we talked about like just body shaming in general, but that doesn't tell you the whole story of things. So going based off of like to shame somebody based off of what you aesthetically see seems just ridiculous. Like then you're really surface person and you need to dig a little bit deeper. And I find that to be very disheartening. Like if we're, and don't get me wrong, I am definitely not the holy person who has not judged people based off of their appearance. Like I've made assumptions. I've definitely have seen like an overweight doctor and been like, oh, good grief. Like, how am I supposed to take advice from you when you look this way, having no knowledge whatsoever that he may be going through something or she may be going through something that I don't know of, right? But I think that it's important to just keep our mouths in check sometimes when it comes to like the shaming based off of just what we visually see. It's not the whole thing.
All right. So I'm going to say one more thing. I know Tyler probably has stuff in his mind too. I'm just like, it is human nature. This is how our brains work to forego details and to forego extra processing and to make assumptions based on our experiences and what we see so that our brain isn't trying to deal with a million things at once. And so I think it's important to say having assumptions based on your experiences visually and what you see, it's important to understand that is human nature. That is how our brains work. So you're not a bad person if that's how your brain works. The difference I think that we would like to see more of, maybe internally and externally, is that break of, okay, my brain's doing this thing where it's automatically making an association. Okay, stop. Is that association necessarily correct? Is it beneficial or for me to even talk about or bring up or discuss? Um, and then having that, which coming from me is, rich, having that pause before thought exits mouth.
No. I mean, you guys kind of covered everything I was kind of thinking as well. And I mean, Steven, you really touched on something that I was going to bring up, and how are clothes fitting and how are you feeling? Because that has been more of a discussion I've been having lately with some clients where they are coming to me, they're overweight, they don't really have a lot of experience tracking. And so we just kind of know from a coaching perspective of, well, we're probably not dieting right away, right? And having to have that discussion of eating a little bit more food, eating a little bit at maintenance, and that can be scary for a lot of people that do have a history of being a bit more overweight and probably having a lot of that messaging, whether it's subtle or not subtle, and having that internal dialogue and being scared to eat more food and not diet right away. But then as they start to move along and just, start to be more conscious of how much they're eating and things like that, and, having those follow-up phone calls with them and talking about, hey, like, yes, maybe we're not seeing the scale move, but how are you feeling? How are your clothes fitting? What is your energy like? And I just had that discussion with a client yesterday, and yeah, he's having some fluctuations, but he's eating more food. He's getting stronger in the gym. Clothes are starting to feel well. And he just, even unprompted, he's like, I just noticed how much better my energy is. And it's like, yes, that is what like we're trying to focus on and trying to change that perception of what we're trying to accomplish. And he understands himself well enough where it's like he's like, I know I'm impatient. But he's like, I'm trying to work on that. And I'm trying to look at this long-term picture of going through this process of not necessarily dieting right away. And that's going to come down the road and establishing some of these other things. And so, it's more so just to reiterate just how I think, how important that is that Stephen mentioned that we are focused on these other markers when we're starting to work through some of this.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, you had said really quick that how it is human nature, like, right, our body or our minds that will assess something and then we have these kind of judgments that happen. And that is human nature. And I think that another way to look at kind of not maybe body shaming, I wish there was like another word for it, but like just accepting that there's going to be judgment at times and like accepting the judgment will exist. So like if I walk into a store and I have a full on Skeletor mask on my face and I'm just grocery shopping, I would assume that people are probably going to think something like, I would hope so.
I
Like, I
think you're
would
going to be a
hope that
cool
we
friend to
have
have.
awareness, like
Well,
that we're visually like that we have this spatial awareness and we can see like what's happening around us, right? So if I walk, like, there's been times that I have felt that I have been judged based off of like how I look in certain situations. Like for instance, um, I've been at social gatherings, like family gatherings, and went to take a cookie, and they were like, "Oh, you're gonna eat that? Oh my God, let me take a picture." And I thought immediately, I was like, "What the fuck? Like, let me do me." And then I thought, I get it. Like the perception is like, I get it. This is the perception. You look at me, you think I like only do a certain thing. So you're perceiving me in a completely wrong way. Cool. Like
Or maybe they're like, oh, don't you have diabetes? Why are you eating a
totally.
cookie?
Yeah. But it
yeah,
was like,
yeah,
it was literally like this
yeah.
big. Like
It's like,
I could
guess
have
what?
it
Whether you're,
wasn't from a health concern. Let me
yeah,
be honest. Like that would be great if like someone said, "What about your diabetes?" Like I would have
it's
loved them for that.
it's like one of those things, right? Where it's like whether you're super fit or whether you're not super fit, you're gonna be judged based off
You're,
the way you look,
yeah,
right? Because
yeah,
all three of us have been, well, not maybe at the extreme end of the spectrums, but like we've all been stage lean. We've all been a bit chunkier than we would normally like, right? And you get judged at either end of the spectrum. Like when I was super lean, it was like, oh, like, it was jokes of, oh, do you have cancer? Like, are you sick? Or, getting looks of bringing your own food to events and things like that. Like, so it's kind of one of those things, like you said, it's gonna happen no matter what, right? And so we just kind of have to learn to accept it and really just kind of easier said than done, but just let it roll off your back, right? Like that is
yeah.
going to be part of that journey of like, hey, whether I get super fit or not, it's gonna happen, and you're just gonna have to kind of ignore it in a sense.
And I think there is a part in there, like whether it's that you are overweight and like you're working towards your goals and people judge you because maybe you're a little more overweight and you don't like how that feels, right? So that is important for you to like receive the information that like is being delivered to you, feel that feeling, and then be able to say like, well, what can I do about it? I can accept it. I can know that this might exist. I can educate, like that's a huge part of things. I can have a conversation. So like being able to, if somebody were to judge me, like I've had people say, you know what, this is a great example. Going around the dinner table and everyone says, like, what's your favorite like dessert ever? Right? I'm a human. Like, I still have favorites. And just because I go to the gym and I eat well and I'm a type 1 diabetic doesn't mean favorites don't exist in my world. I was literally skipped over. Like they were like, do Danica, skip. And I was like, what about me? But educating and saying, having a moment to educate and also say, hey guys, like I could be involved in this conversation too. It's so interesting how you didn't want to involve me in the conversation. Or maybe somebody is on their fat loss journey and they have a lot of weight to lose and their friends don't invite them for a hike. And they like are like, hey guys, like I would like to be able to go for a hike too. Like it's so interesting that you didn't invite me for the hike. I would want to do that. So being able to have a moment to educate, if you know that if you feel that you're being judged and it feels like it hurts or it feels like it's being a misperception, that could also be your time to advocate for yourself and to stick up for yourself, not in a way that's very defensive and attacking, but more of an educational way.
No, fight him, punch him right in the face.
Do.
So let me introduce my friend Anxiety here into the situation, and let's
Well,
say,
hello.
My
hello,
best friend.
hello.
Well, hello.
Maybe some of these also, like, maybe they just think you're boring and they just didn't care about your opinion on desserts. Maybe they just think you have terrible taste. Maybe it has nothing to do with your body. Maybe they just didn't invite you on the hike because they don't care.
They don't like
Maybe
you.
yeah.
You have no friends, actually.
That's not anxiety. That's like feeling of isolation.
So my point is,
Neurosis.
here's the point of that. We might also be kind of putting that idea onto others. It could be something completely different. They might not have even ever thought about it. They might not have been like, "Oh yeah, we don't care about your opinion. We're going to skip you because you're fit and you obviously don't eat desserts." It could have been something completely different. It could have just been that the person after you got really excited and has ADHD and was like, "Yeah, it's my turn. I got to say this before I forget." You know, Otherwise it's gone forever.
Yeah.
And so we also want to make sure that within this idea of body shame, whatever direction it's coming from or going, that we are not manifesting that either for other people with our own possible insecurities, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So looking at yourself and saying, well, wait a minute, am I shaming myself? Like, how am I doing? Because you better be pretty solid first, right? Especially if you're going to advocate for yourself, like in a situation like that, you got to make sure that you advocate against your own self too.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I'll be honest, I don't care about most people out there. Like most of the people I see in the gym, I could give two shits about anything in their lives. It doesn't affect me, it doesn't impact me. And then when I think about that, I was like, okay, I realized most of them probably don't give a shit about me either. Like they just don't
Mm.
care. I'm not
People are
on their
so,
radar.
yeah, people are
Yeah.
so involved with themselves, like they don't have the energy to even give you two thoughts. And I think just, in the same vein of just like this little discussion part is, really evaluating too is like, where is the feedback coming from? Who is the feedback coming from? Is it coming from someone within your little circle of trust, to borrow Meet the Fockers, right? Or is it coming outside of that circle? And I think, again, kind of coming back to that, what we talked about of the judgment is no matter what going to come, evaluating it, who is it coming from? Is it coming from someone that I know truly does care for me, right? And I think that can maybe then eliminate some of that negative emotion that we can get from, if we just want to call it shaming, we can call it that of, hey, maybe this is actually coming from a place of, hey, maybe this person is actually maybe a little bit worried about me, or it can give that confidence to us then to educate them a little bit more of, yeah, I'm in prep. This is more of an extreme. Or yes, I am in my fat loss phase right now, and this is very important to me because of X, Y, and Z, right? And so I think really evaluating of where that is coming from, and does it what's the word I'm looking, like, does it require my actual attention? Does it require my actual care, or whatever you want to kind of put there, my bandwidth, my emotional bandwidth?
Mhm.
Yeah. I think it's also interesting to say because there are people who will care about you and will still say things from a negative place,
Yep.
right? Whether that's their own insecurities, whether it's their, just preconceived notions, that kind of stuff. So that absolutely can still happen. Somebody can love you, they can care about you, and they can still be an a-hole. They can still say something that's rude and insensitive, and non-helpful, right? And so I think being able to understand that difference, hopefully, like not even necessarily who it's coming from and how they feel about you, but the the intent behind that can sometimes soften the blow on some things, which can be beneficial. And it's not about helping them, it's about helping us. It's about helping how I feel about this situation. It's about me being more comfortable and it not impacting me in any kind of significantly negative way. Because at the end of the day, I want to control who I allow to speak life or death into me, right? I don't want to give people who are going to speak negativity or failures or, you know, the things that I don't want out of life into my life on a regular basis. It's not that I don't want people that are going to be honest with me about concerns that they have because they care. That's different. Because it's so interesting. My wife's family is absolutely phenomenal. My family is fucked up. Like, so I am so used to people in my family saying or doing things that are hurtful. And it's like, I know they love me, but like, man, like their ability to love sucks ass.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I think it's important to mention is with like the shaming or the negative comments or anything like that, it can also be played around habits or behaviors that we have. And especially as like holidays come, I notice that some of my clients will say, oh, but I'm afraid, like, how do I navigate this? Because so and so always has something to say if I like bring my own meal or if I choose not to have the cake or something like that. And it's always negative, and they're always trying to put me down with like me going on the turkey trot before like I go to the house. And you mentioned a few things, but knowing where it's coming from is really important. And if it's not coming from a good place, like then you need to reflect on that. But also, if you're proud of what you're doing, if you're proud of how you look, if you're proud of your behaviors and your like how your habits are aligning with your future self and everything, then fuck them. Like, then either have a conversation if they really mean something to you, if it bothers you that much, or be like, okay, I'm sorry if I wasn't entertaining you today. I'm going to go on my turkey trot now and like, I'm going to do me. You can continue to do you as much as you want, but I'm not going to let that impact like my flow of life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Escalate, escalate and get aggressive.
Like, yeah, but like I also find like and I mean I'll use myself as an example here. Like, recently, like I made the decision to get sober. And I told, yeah, yeah. And
Hell
and
yeah,
I,
buddy. That's
yeah,
awesome.
thank
I'm
you.
I'm super excited for you for that.
Thank you. And a big part, like I was scared to tell the people that were close to me, right? Because it was just a big social factor. But what I found was that the people that I did tell initially, they understood. They're like, great for you, awesome. And I think we kind of are talking around this part of like, who is it coming from? And I think that can be a scary factor for people of like, I'm making this big life change, right? And I might be a little bit different in the sense of what I'm doing, but who I am hasn't necessarily changed. And I think having almost that just upfront discussion and just kind of, telling people and not in a arrogant way or anything in that sense, but just being, hey, like this is what I'm doing, and maybe you tell them a little bit why. And I find that, or at least I found that most people, if they do care about you and they are your friend or whatever, they're gonna be accepting, right? Like I had one friend go, kind of make fun of me, but in a friendly way. He's like, I'm actually proud of you, but I'm still gonna make fun of you, and that's just who he is.
Mhm.
And every single person though that I've told, it's like, no, it's hey, that's great. And again, so it's get over that fear because if you are making those big changes that are positive, most people are gonna be accepting of you. And I think you're going to find then those people who are really in kind of that circle of trust.
So this is an interesting one for me because some actually shit, I would say most of my closest friends are overweight. Like those are most of the people who mean the most to me in my life that I love the most. And it has created awkwardness, but I don't, not because of how I see them, but because of how they think I see them. And so like there's this weird thing to understand that like, hey, look, if some people really truly are judging you because of how you look, or they're giving you crap because of your weight, or because you go to the gym or whatever it is that they do, like there are other people out there. It's this weird thing because just like our brains are wired to make assumptions and to go to specific things, we're also wired to care about social interactions to some degree. And this can go in either direction, right? I don't necessarily think that it's a good thing if we are encouraging people to have unhealthy habits that are going to take away from their quality of life in the long term, their independence, and a lot of the other things, right? So I don't want to encourage that kind of behavior. But just because somebody doesn't accept you because of the way you look, there are plenty of people that don't accept me because I'm ugly as shit, you know? Um, well, cool. Those people just aren't for me, right? Like it's just I'm just not your person and you're not my kind of people. But guess what? There's a lot of other people out there that are my kind of people and that I'm their kind of person. And guess what? We're going to be able to build each other up. And it doesn't mean that I don't work on the things I want to work on. It doesn't mean necessarily that I love my body 100% and that I'm super happy with it all the time. But F and A, like, think about how much different life is when you have people around you that are building you up and encouraging you, not encouraging you in bad habits, still calling you out, being honest with you, but overall, they're building you up and encouraging you into the things that are going to add value and fulfillment into your life.
Right. And that encouragement can sometimes feel perhaps like judgment if we have our own
Yes.
insecurities
Yes.
about that specific thing. Because I've had family even say specifically to me, it feels as though sometimes you judge me. And I have said, well, I do, because you have said many times, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to get healthy. My cholesterol is high. My blood pressure is high. I'm trying to do this thing. And then you engage in certain behaviors that don't align with those things that you're desiring. So, my judgment that is perceived that you feel from me is because I love you and care about you so much. And I'm trying to encourage you, because that judgment, don't get it twisted with your own insecurity or your own kind of thing that you're working on. And me encouraging you and trying to build you up doesn't mean I'm just passing judgment. It doesn't mean I'm like punching you in the gut. It means that I care about you.
Danica's like, I am judging you, but not because you
I
still
am.
weigh this amount. I'm judging you because you can't do what you say you want to do.
Well, yeah. Yeah. And I feel like judgment doesn't always have to be this negative thing. Like if I say to my husband, like, I I don't know, it could be anything. Or like Tyler, if I'll use
Well, what about
alcohol
Steven?
or Steven, I'll use
Yeah.
alcohol as an example. If I say to my husband, like, say I'm drinking 2 glasses of wine every single night and I know that it disrupts my sleep, and I'm like, oh, I really need to stop doing this, like every single night, to be expected that he would pass judgment on that, right? That doesn't mean that it's a negative thing. Like, look at this nasty ass drinking her wine, da, da, da. Like, no, it means that like that judgment is like this questioning of your choices because I love you and I'm trying to encourage you to take a different path. Does that make sense?
So I think the way that I would communicate that so that it makes sense in my brain, because we all know my brain's effed, um, is that yeah, the judgment's there, but it's how I go about that. Because if the idea is, how can I help you? What are other ways that we can go about thinking about this or addressing this that will allow change in action that gets you closer to the goal that you say is important to you? Or can we just say that maybe that goal is not as important to you? And maybe that's a realization to make. I
Yeah.
think most externally, I know for me, I don't necessarily care what is it or isn't important to you. That's not up to me. What I find frustrating and what probably people feel judged from me at times in my personal life for is the hypocrisy. Like saying, this is what I want, these are the things that are important to me, but then making choices that all go against that. And I don't care. The thing that bothers me is saying, well, then just don't say that that's important to you. That's okay if it's not. If the rubber doesn't meet the road on that thing, cool, but let's just be honest about it. And I think that's, for me, even though that's not always true either, it can be that important to somebody. But when we have a lifetime of habits and emotions and how we deal with triggers and those kinds of things, right? It's not always so simple. So I have to remind myself sometimes on that too, to be like, okay, yes, like this in and of itself, it's a little bit of a trigger for me. Find it annoying. I'm pompous about it. Cool. That's who I am. But I have to also understand that my perspective is has a lot of holes on somebody else.
Hmm.
Also, I don't
Yeah.
understand, everything that they've gone through. I don't understand the all of their formative years and what they, have been taught or what their brain automatically goes to for how to deal with specific situations and things that may be holding them back from in that same situation.
Yeah. Really quick, the definition for judgment, the ability to make considered decisions or come to a sensible conclusions. And nowhere in there is it like when you stab someone in the back and talk nastiness to them. So like judgment also doesn't have to be this negative, nasty thing. I'm not saying judge people. That's not what I'm saying. So don't get it twisted, listeners. Like this is not what I'm
All
saying.
We're
about
talking
judging
about it in the
everyone now.
come on, we're talking about it in the biblical sense, all right?
In the biblical sense.
Like you are either moral or immoral. You are good or bad based
No,
on
but
judgment.
it is important to like want the best for people if that's what they also want for themselves. Like if that's like their jam and that's what they want and you want to encourage them because you're showing compassion and love and caring and being kind and like sometimes that may come across like judgment, but also judgment just means you're helping them to make considerable, reasonable, sensible choices in order to help them or progress them.
But you can do it like a nice person or you can do it like an asshole, and that
Or
matters.
don't be an asshole,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah.
We probably should have done that way earlier. Like the
Don't be an
whole
asshole.
no,
Us.
like the whole definition thing.
We probably should have started with that.
Crap.
Okay, we got there.
I'm not redoing it.
It's
Okay.
okay.
So we talked a lot about different things, but you had a specific, I know, thought process in general that is, I think, less common. And I was like, bleh, when you brought it up initially. But so let's chat about that.
Fit shaming.
That's it.
When you get judged,
Briefly.
when you have negative judgment, like a negative take, and when you're fit and you're just going about your day being involved in fitness and you get judged for it. The reason why I brought this up is because it's again being when people are just unkind for things that you are doing, but the things that you are doing aren't necessarily like a negative thing. So then you're like, I don't understand that. Why would you get down on me if I'm choosing to make a healthy choice for myself? Like, I'm not choosing to like just like put lines of cocaine down and snort them in front of you. Like, I'm choosing to like make sure that I'm getting my water intake in, like, I'm staying hydrated. So, I'm confused when people will because it does happen. Like and I have experienced it and I know others have experienced it, especially with like possibly social gatherings or like not engaging in certain things and then feeling as though they're being frowned upon or shamed or whatever, like talked negatively too. And it hurts. It just hurts. So I wanted to mention that because I think sometimes fat shaming or body shaming, we forget that it also does exist when you're also doing good things for yourself.
So here's how I want to explain it. I remember when I first got into the bodybuilding scene, I was doing my first show in 2013. There was this dude, and he was really well conditioned. He was loud, and he was obnoxious, and he was a fucking dick.
Is it you?
And like, let's be real, that was how I saw most people in the bodybuilding industry. Like I saw them as roided out people that were rude and they were stuck up and they were full of themselves and they thought they were better than everybody. And they probably picked on people and they were probably bullies because, that's what the jocks did in high school. And like that was 100%. I was like, see, I don't want to be a bodybuilder because that's the kind of person that bodybuilders are. And 100%, I judged the shit out of that guy. We're definitely going to get comments about our language today. Um, but like and to be fair, I still see lots of people like that. Now, I'm able to because I've had a ton of experience with people who are pro bodybuilders and whatever, and they a lot of them are wonderful people. They're down to earth, they're chill. I can sit down, I can have a philosophical conversation with them. Um, and we can talk about things in life that have nothing to do with lifting weights or how we look. So I've had to learn on that end of the spectrum, but 100% like there was a lot of my life where those kinds of people were rude, terrible people to me. And so there's still some of that association when I see somebody, I'm like, that dude's probably an asshole. And like, fair or not, like it's like I understand that well because a lot of those people were assholes to me when I was growing up.
Yeah. I think, I mean, you kind of worked your way upstream too, and you were like, because the jocks were like that, right? And then you were like, so this equals this. Like, I see it. And it's being able to know. So it's like the act of criticizing people based off of like being fit or what they're engaging in for like, or trying to be fit or increasing their fitness level or whatever. It's as devastating, and people may not understand this, but it is as negatively impacting and devastating as fat shaming. So like, it's not, yes, it is.
I, I have a very hard time agreeing to that
Why?
because because most people who suffer from fat shaming, I think a lot of them they don't have the same life things going on. I think when you go to the gym and you build muscle and you take control of your body and you're able to control your nutrition and stuff, these are self-affirming things, right?
Totally.
Inherently, as a fit person, you have gone through a lot of things that help affirm who you are, your identity, your confidence, and all of those things. So I would actually blatantly disagree because I think a lot of people on the other end of the spectrum when it comes to body shaming don't have those same things available in their experiences and in their lives to be able to handle that external judgment the same and put that against their identity of who they are.
Yeah, they would have to build up. Like they would hopefully have a buildup of their self-confidence and internal dialogue in a positive way, right? But it could also be you might find that some people it feels very lonely because maybe that's all they have and all their friends don't engage in it, all their families don't engage in it, and all they hear from the said support that is around them or neighborhood that is around them or nature or nurture is just negative. Like, there you go again, going to your gym. There you go again, cooking your meals. Okay, guess you're not eating with us again. Look at you being all fit. Like, that has negative impact. So it's the degree to which you are receiving it, right? And the same would go with fat shaming, though. Like, if somebody has like their whole family is engaged and their whole family can like say, oh, I know you're doing a great job though. Like, man, that sucks that you heard that, but you're doing an awesome job and I'm here with you. Do you want to go for a walk together? Like, let's do that together. And, or they could have extreme and they're lonely in it, right? Their whole family is fit. They're the only one that's not fit. So all they hear is negative. So I think that the neighborhood or what is around them impacts the way that it's going to be filtering into like that confidence internal dialogue. So like I hear you, I see you, and I also think that it depends on like the individual.
So with that, sorry, Tyler, I know again, my
All
bad.
good.
Um, I maybe in that personal circle that then there may be some truth to that. But when you look outside of that personal circle, social media, regular media, everything else,
Mhm.
there is a significant amount more shaming and hate speech to people that are overweight than people who are fit. If anything, there is like you can post pictures of yourself if you're fit online, and people are gonna like people go out and like them. So I can understand that possibly in some of your personal relationships, it could be detrimental as well. But I think in the overarching thing, that is a minority, and I think that it does not. I believe it pales in comparison to the social acceptance that we have for shaming people for being overweight, the words that are acceptable to use for them for being overweight, and the absolute preponderance of it that we have overall as a society. I do not think that people in the who are tend to be more fit or are in the fitness industry experience that same thing. And I think that that is an overarching thing that you can't get away from. So even if you're having your own personal life where people are being dicks or not understanding or not supportive, like we wouldn't have that same kind of extreme that other people would have.
Yeah.
And so it's not to detract and say that it's good or that it's still not a negative thing and it doesn't still have negative impact. But I think that we have to,
It's just more manageable.
I think it's absolutely much more manageable. And that if that's what we're getting judged for, we're probably like, I don't, it's just not the same. Like, I
Yeah.
just think about it and I'm like, oh no, somebody judges me for being fit. But like, okay, there are way worse things in my life that somebody could judge me about. And the amount of people who are going to judge me about that are going to be fairly small in the grand scheme of things. So I think that is an easier thing for me to handle mentally versus if if I'm on the other end having that realistic thought process of, oh, this is probably most people that I meet judge me for this. And I think they're very different in terms of the scope.
Yeah. See, you and I would approach it in different ways then. We would both get to the same kind of end game. But if a client came to me and like the same client came to you and you'd say, but look at all the things that you got going for you. Like this is what you're being judged on. It's not that bad. Like you're doing great. That's not that bad. Where I would say that must hurt. And I could understand how that would you'd feel a certain way about that. And it probably feels a little uncomfortable. And I'm sure you wish that that person didn't say that. Maybe you should have a conversation to let them know that like those words still impact you, irregardless of the fact that like, look at all of what you have going on for you. It still impacted you and like made you feel a certain way. So to just dismiss it and to say, yeah, but I have all this going on. Like that is that's where you and I would differ in paths, which neither one is right or wrong at all. We even started this with saying, like, I go a little tiny bit deeper, right? So both would get to the same outcome of let's accept this and like let's make sure that we're not like marinating on this so much that it's derailing us. But you and I would just have a different approach. Probably why I'm the mindset coach.
Tyler? Tyler?
I'm just still waiting to be accused of taking steroids.
Uh, one day.
I would love that
Tyler,
compliment.
what
People
do
think
you
it's a negative thing. I'm like, oh man, I wish.
Yeah. And again, it's not that somebody's feelings are invalid, but I think when we approach this subject in a public forum, where people can hear, I think it's important for me to admit and say the the level of judgment or persecution, however people want to frame that, that I would face as somebody who is fit is very, very minor in terms of the rest of the population. Because there are a lot of people listening to this right now that are going to be like, well, I want to be fit one day, or maybe I don't want to be fit, but I just want to be in a different spot, or maybe I don't want that at all, but I understand and this is where I'm coming from. And I think that it's important to be upfront and honest about the fact that they receive much more of that negativity than I think I ever will in my fitness journey, my fitness goal, or by being fit. Again, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to have feelings about that those feelings aren't valid. Um, But I think when we're talking about this in the scope and we have a lot of different people from different backgrounds and in different positions listening, it's important to understand and say, from my perspective, your problem is more monumental than mine. Your problem is probably largely it has a lot more to do with society than mine. They're kind of the same. They're similar. I might experience some of the same feelings that you do. I might experience some of the same things or similar things that you do. But I probably will not ever truly experience that on the level that you do.
Mm, yeah, I could I could get down with that. I also think there's many relationships in my life that mean a lot to me, and they have yet to, like, I have been shamed by them because of my husband and I are both very fit and active, and they have said, like, I just can't connect with you, or you just don't understand, you don't do this, or there you go on your workouts. And that has been a very big loss for me. Like, that's been a very significant loss, being judged for a habit that I engage in or a misperception, and that has hurt. So, like, whether it's a bigger body or smaller body, or like more habits or less habits, that impact of like that emotional state, I feel like fit shaming can still have that.
Yeah, and for sure, I
Yeah.
think like you said, I think your uh, my how I would probably deal with that is probably different. I would try and say, okay, well, maybe we can't relate on this thing. Shoot, I don't know anybody that I can relate to on everything, right? We were literally just talking about this before the podcast started, right? There's
Yeah.
nobody that I like everything about. Um,
Yeah.
not even my wife. Um, right? So that's not a thing, but we can focus on the things that we do have in common, you know? So maybe we don't most of my friends, I don't talk about fitness. I talk about fitness stuff with you guys and with Paul and the people we work with. I don't have those conversations with people otherwise though. We'll talk about, maybe going out shooting or, four-wheelers or motorcycles or music and something else. Um, and it can absolutely be and let's be real, right now people are feeling this quite literally. It's very disappointing and it absolutely can be really, a lot of people can be hurt. And just there's feelings associated with somebody focusing on one portion of who you are, and then deciding to end a relationship or to not have the same relationship with you because of that.
Right.
Um, which is literally the antithesis of what we're talking about today, because we're talking about that same thing. Like we want to pull back. We have a ton of other common ground. So for me, I'd be like, all right, well, can we find other common ground? Yes, no. Let's focus on that. Let's approach our friendship on that. And maybe we don't have to put like the focus on this. And if you can't get past that, then unfortunately, like that's going to be a negative impactor on our relationship. The relationship's not for me. If we can get past that and we can work with that and you can recognize that I'm not just a person that works out, just like you're not a person that just does IT for a living, there's a lot of other things in life, then great. But that sounds to me like, and I don't take, or I try not to take those things too personally, because at that point, it's not anything we ever had control over. Well, we don't need to be somebody who we aren't for other people's approvals, because at that point, they don't actually like you for you at that point. And to be fair, if you don't like me for me, fucking you ain't for me. Cool.
Yeah.
Like that's fine. I don't want people who like me for being someone else, for having to be disingenuine, right? There can be things about me that people don't like. And Danica has them too. She's like, Steven, I don't like lots of things about you. She tells me all the time.
I do
Super
not.
rude.
No.
But
I
but but that's
I do
okay.
agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I think what it does come down to is having the self-confidence of like what you're doing is true to you, and how you're living your life. As long as it aligns well with like who you are, there are probably going to be people that are going to say shit irregardless of what you do. And you don't if like you really find it necessary to change that habit for another person, then like think deep on that. But you should take everything with like a little bit of like a bouncy house around you. And like if people are going to throw kind of daggers at you, they can bounce off and you can be like, well, that was kind of interesting. I wonder why you did that. I'm confident in what I'm doing right now. I appreciate all that you got going on, but I'm going to continue course. And not dismissing feelings, right? You can still feel the things and like you said, they're valid and everything, but staying true to like what you're doing and education, I feel like is a huge part if it's really necessary. And then surrounding yourselves with the people that are genuinely like interested in your authentic self. If you don't align well with that person, it's okay also to say goodbye. It's okay to have a conversation. Like I find conversations to be so impactful and people don't have them nowadays. So whether it's like fit shaming, fat shaming, job shaming, finance shaming, whatever shaming you want to call it, know where it's coming from, know your own identity. And if you're true to that identity and you're driving with that identity, keep to it.
Yeah.
Down with the sickness.
Get down with it.
Because they ain't us.
I got nothing else after that. That's we're right around there an hour too.
Right. Yeah, I would love to hear other people's like perspectives on it and how they have just felt that in their life and how it's impacted them. And then if it's like taken over their world to really, really evaluate that. Like, is it something that they have, you ultimately have control over like your own self and what you're doing. So you can also control the impact that it has on you. To me, too, I shouldn't let as many, like, the connections that I have in my life that judge me for, like, I don't know, being a type 1 diabetic and not engaging in all the Halloween candy. Like, I should say, shame on you. Like, it doesn't matter, I'm going to do me, but it still impacts me on a level where I'm like, why am I still thinking about this? Like, I shouldn't care what other people think. And some people are going to be like that. Some people are going to be like you, Stephen, who are like, I don't really care. Say whatever you want. I don't care. And other people are going to be in the middle. So I think that it's important to know, like, if it's bothering you that much, to have a little bit of introspective of why is it bothering me so much? Is it worth my energy? Am I okay with who I am? And build that confidence up. Like, don't let that derail you from living the life that you are in pursuit of.
Gotta keep up that choo-choo because
This
you're
is
not
a
getting
good
derailed.
one. It was a
Yeah, I thought it was good.
It was a good one. We took a couple different ways.
All
I
right.
also think it's great to have disagreements in conversations.
Love it.
Me too.
Love it.
Yeah.
Bec- As long as you can keep the disagreements to the disagreements
Yeah.
or the difference in values or the difference in perspective and on the subject and keep it like
Yeah.
it has nothing to do with who you are, has nothing to do with who I am. Like we just might not see eye to eye on that thing, and that's cool.
And that's okay. Like that's a beautiful thing. I find that to be also something that the listeners can take away is some people aren't going to see eye to eye with you, and that's okay. Like Stephen and I are still going to be friends. Well, I'm still going to be your friend. You don't have to friend me if you want to, but
I
you can.
hate you now.
Thank you. But I like value you even more, knowing that you can have like your opinion and have like truth in what you're saying, and we can not see eye to eye and just continue on. So maybe that's something like a takeaway to that listeners, like if they're feeling judgment or anything, they can also incorporate that in the life. You're not always going to be on the same page as everybody else around you.
Which, by the way, is actually a super helpful thing to know because, say, I'm trying to help somebody or I'm trying to help somebody work through something, and my perspective is not being helpful. And, you know, now I know, you know what? Danica sees this from a different perspective. I think that would be much more beneficial for somebody or for you. And now I can either try and utilize that perspective or utilize that approach, whether or not I necessarily agree with it myself,
Mhm.
or say, hey, Danica, I think this person would really benefit from your perspective. And I think that you would be a really good fit to help them in this thing that I'm struggling to help them with.
Right. Right, exactly. And vice versa. I could definitely be harder.
Rough. All right, Rough Riders anthem. Let's go.